Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take this time to welcome you to the role of the media in contemporary society, a conversation with Marty Barron. This is a webinar brought to you in partnership between the FIU Steven J Green School of International and Public Affairs and the FIU School of Communication and Journalism. It's a series of compelling conversations featuring leading figures in journalism and media. The issues explored include the critical roles the media play in democratic societies in a digital age, quote unquote fake news, and the public's trust in media organizations. And news reporting, investigative journalism, opinion journalism, and social media, and their impacts on shaping public opinion and public policy. I'm proud to be a member of this team. I'm proud to partner with my friend and longtime colleague, Dr. John Stacks, the founding dean of the Green School of International and Public Affairs, on this partnership. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Dr. Stacks with the comment, leadership matters. And Dr. Stacks, you have been a leader at FIU for many, many years.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everybody. It's really an honor to be here with you for the launch of this important series. In many ways, I cannot think of a more important series, given the events of the past 2 months. We're proud to join with you in the School of Communication and Journalism to host this series of conversations with leading figures in journalism and the media. And surely Marty Barron is one of the most important of those figures, given his success both here in Miami, in Boston, and at the Washington Post. I want to briefly acknowledge the Green family, whose support helps make this event possible through our Dorothea Green lecture series. We're so grateful to Ambassador Green and his wife, Dorothea Green, daughter Kimberly Green, for their support of the Green School. And now I'd like to turn today over to my friend and colleague, our senior fellow, David Kramer. Take it away, David.
Dean Stack and Dean Schreiner, thanks very much for the introduction and the welcome, and welcome to all of you. I am privileged to kick off this series that we're launching here at FIU. And as my two colleagues said, I can't think of a better way to start than with Marty Barron, who was executive editor of the Washington Post from January 2nd, 2013 until just last month, leaving February 28th, where he oversaw the Post print and digital news operations. And during his tenure as executive editor, the newsroom grew from 580 staff to almost 1,000 journalists. News outlets under his leadership have won 17 Pulitzer Prizes, including 10 at the Post. And the Post during his tenure won 4 times for national reporting, twice for explanatory reporting, and once each for investigative reporting, criticism, feature photography, and public service. Marty had been editor of the Boston Globe for 11 and a half years. And during that time, the Globe won 6 Pulitzer Prizes. The Globe was awarded the Public Service Prize in 2003 for its investigation into a pattern of concealing clergy sex abuse in the Catholic Church, coverage portrayed years later in the Academy Award-winning movie Spotlight. Before the Globe, he held top editing positions at the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Miami Herald. And under his leadership at the Miami Herald, that paper won the 2001 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news coverage of the raid to recover Elian Gonzalez, the Cuban boy at the center of a fierce immigration and custody dispute. He began his journalism career at the Herald in 1976 as a state reporter, and later as a business writer, and became executive editor later on at the Herald starting in 2000. During his time at the Post, he became a leading defender of the First Amendment and the role of journalists, famously saying, "We are not at war, we are at work." He is a native of Tampa. And so Marty Barron, thanks so much for joining us here today to kick off this series. We're thrilled to have you. And what I'd like to do is have a conversation and invite questions from our viewers as well later on in this chat. But let me start with some of the perhaps the three biggest issues that have faced our country, our society, and of course the field of journalism. Tell us what it was like to both report during a pandemic and to report on a pandemic at the same time.
Well, look, this is a story that, unlike any that we've ever faced before, we never imagine that we would confront a story like this. In terms of how to cover it, we evacuated our office on March 10th, so a little over a year ago, and we had to learn how to work remotely, which was something that we had not done before. Fortunately, we had technology available that allowed us to do that. Initially, we kept a core nucleus of people in the newsroom, but we decided ultimately that it was better if everybody just worked from home. Everybody would have same access to all of the meetings that we held, and it worked, remarkably well from that perspective. But it's been hugely challenging. First of all, challenging for our staff who were at risk because one of the aspects of journalism is being present, being a witness to events. That's a big part of journalism, core to it. And here, staff reporters and photographers were taking a risk in just being out covering events. And so that was a huge concern: is how do we protect our staff even as they go about doing their reporting? And how do we communicate with each other? And what kinds of risks are appropriate? When should we take risks? When shouldn't we take risks? It was also a huge story in the sense that it affected absolutely everything that we cover. There's not a department in the newsroom that was not affected by this story. That includes the people who covered education, of course, but also people who covered sports, people who covered the arts, people who covered things to do around town. There was nothing to do. I mean, all of a sudden, these departments were finding their entire universe of their professional universe upended, and they had to reinvent what it was they did. It affected politics, of course. It affected the world. I mean, our foreign correspondents were covering this story. This was not just a story for the United States, but this is something that affected everybody throughout the world, and all of our correspondents had to work on it. So we had to mobilize the entire newsroom to cover this, and to cover it under circumstances that posed a risk to the health and safety of our own people.
And before the pandemic, of course, the Post was also very busy covering first candidate Trump and then the Trump administration. Talk a little bit about that, particularly given that early on, I think as early as February 2017, so a month into his administration, President Trump on Twitter announced that as it was called, mainstream media were fake news and the enemy of the people. That obviously created some huge challenges for you, the Post, and every other journalist.
Sure. Well, he had been attacking the press throughout the campaign as well. He vilified us. He vilified other media organizations. He essentially incited his own followers against us. Certain reporters were discovering they needed to actually have security simply to cover his rally. He had actually banished the Washington Post from receiving credentials to report on his rally, so we had to go in on our own as any member of the public. And even under one of those circumstances, they discovered who our reporter was, and they refused to let him in. It was a moment when he declared that we were the enemy of the people, and attempted to denigrate us that way. It had come on top of his efforts to marginalize us, to discredit us, to dehumanize us, delegitimize us, and dehumanize us. And so he was clearly trying to turn his supporters against us. He was trying to disqualify us as an arbiter of the fact, and even worse, to portray us as traitors to the country. I have to say that it worked with a substantial portion of his followers, and that's a challenge for the press, which depends on which has at its core gathering the facts, putting them into context, giving people the information they need and deserve to know. And if the public simply dismisses that, discounts anything that we do, then it's a real challenge to the role that we play in a democracy. which of course was his objective, was to make sure we played no role, to make sure that we were viewed as the opposition party, to make sure that if we wrote anything that that called into question what he said was the truth, that his followers would simply dismiss it, would pay it no heed. And so that was the objective. And it was also part of a bigger effort on their part, which was to his part and his administration's part, which was basically to obliterate the idea of objective fact, that there are such things as facts, that they're not just a matter of who has power and who you support, what your tribal allegiances are, and who has the biggest megaphone and all of that. It's not a matter just of opinion, it's a matter of evidence. And he was engaging in an assault on the very idea of objective fact. It started almost laughably with the phrase alternative facts, but it wasn't laughable in the end. It was a genuine effort to ensure that there were no independent arbiters of fact, certainly not the press, but not others too, not universities, not historians, not the courts, not scientists, as we've discovered over the last year.
And the Post ran the fact checker that I think uncovered, well, I don't even remember what the final count was, but thousands and thousands of lies, mistruths, incorrect statements. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what was the thinking behind that and how challenging it was to keep up with the flurry, if you will?
Well, it ended up well over 30,000. So these are false and misleading statements. Some of those false statements are outright lies, meaning that he actually knew that what he was saying was not true. It's not something that he was deluding himself about it, was convinced of their truth and still said it anyway. He actually did know that it was false and said it anyway. So the fact checker well predates the Trump administration. Yeah. Something that we've had for a very long time. It's launched by Glenn Kessler on the Washington Post staff. It arises out of a sense of obligation that we should challenge people who, particularly politicians, who say things that are not true or that are misleading, and that we should tell people what those facts are. And it took off, though, during the Trump administration because the number of false and misleading statements and outright lies took off as well, to a degree that we had never seen before. And so they were, let's put it this way, they were certainly well occupied over the last 4 years. They had more than they could handle. We actually added people to the staff in order to deal with that. And they very systematically recorded what those false and misleading statements were. Many of them were repeated nonetheless. And of course, Trump sought to discredit the fact checker and to dismiss it and to portray it again as sort of a partisan effort, which it was not. But it is a big effort because in a single speech there could be dozens of false and misleading statements. I think there were some as many as 50 or 60 in a single speech. I mean, keep in mind those speeches, those rallies went on for quite some time, maybe an hour and a half, something like that. So it was a huge challenge, but it's something that the Post has been long committed to and remains committed to, and they're doing it for the Biden administration as well. We're not finding as many, the fact checkers not discovering as many false and misleading statements with the Biden administration, but it is finding them and it is reporting them, and it will continue to do so. Nobody can actually achieve the same level of that the Trump administration did in that regard.
Did you ever find, looking back on the 4 years, that there was some self-censorship? Because that, to some extent, is what perhaps was the goal here as well, not just to try to discourage or to challenge the accuracy of reporting, but to actually get journalists to think twice before they might face the wrath of a Trump Twitter storm. Any examples come to mind on that?
Not for us. We were not intimidated by him whatsoever. We never held back from what we would report. We've always seen our job as look, our core principle at the Post, it's right on our walls as you walk into our newsroom, to tell the truth as nearly as the truth may be ascertained. And that tells you that it's a process, it's hard, truth can be elusive, but it also tells you that there is such a thing as the truth. And that our job is to get at it, get the facts, put them in context, tell the truth as nearly as it may be ascertained. And so we take that seriously. And we weren't intimidated by him during the administration, during the campaign, as was evident by the fact that he banished us from those rallies. We were a target of his attacks, as were other media, and we became an even greater target of his attacks once he became president, because more was at stake for him, but also because he had the power to try to intimidate. I don't know of an instance where we held back in any way, that we were intimidated by him, or it just didn't enter into our thinking. That's not doing, that wouldn't be doing our job. That would be a real failure on our part. It would be a real failure to fulfill our mission as journalists if we did something like that.
You also had a phrase that was at the top of the paper every day: democracy dies in darkness. Can you talk a little bit about the background of that?
Sure. Well, we were acquired in October 2013 by Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, as everybody seems to know. And he thought that we should have a phrase that synthesized what our mission is and what our distinct role was as a paper that was, as a news organization that was situated in the nation's capital, and that had a history and heritage such as the one that the Post has had. And so we gave it an incredible amount of thought. It was a matter of huge debate. There were, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options. I'm not sure we were all entirely clear as to that this was going to be used on every single product that we had. It would be used everywhere. And ultimately we settled on this. And, you know, there was plenty of debate. I mean, how many people have in their motto the words dies and darkness? It's not exactly the kind of thing that you would, you know, I don't think sort of any advertising company would particularly recommend that. But it dated back to Watergate. There was a judge who, in the Watergate case, who used the phrase "democracy dies in the dark," and Bob Woodward had been using the phrase "democracy dies in darkness" for years in his speeches, and having failed to come up with anything better, we settled on that, and it's been it's been controversial, but also a hit with people, and we tried things with light. But it sounded really weird. I mean, it sounded kind of cult-like, and it sounded way too self-adulatory. So, we went with that, and there was a lot of talk about it. A lot of people have noticed it, which is a good thing. The fact that there was controversy was deemed to be a good thing. It's better than, a lot of times you go through these exercises and you come up with something that's very anodyne, and you spend a lot of time on it, but nobody even notices and they couldn't care less. Ours really resonated. And it had nothing, by the way, to do with Donald Trump. Our desire to do that, it predated Trump. That phrase had been knocking around in our deliberations prior to him. But a lot of people in the Trump orbit felt that it, and his supporters felt that it was directed at him, but it was not.
Let me, before I turn to the third major issue, which is racial tensions that dominated the news last year, I do want to ask you one more question about covering Donald Trump. And this may apply more to some of the cable networks, CNN, MSNBC, but there has been criticism that actually the news media paid too much attention to Donald Trump. Do you think there's something to that?
Well, I do think the cable networks, particularly CNN, did, because it covered his rallies, every single rally he had from beginning to end. That's not, in my view, journalism. I mean, journalism, we actually make decisions about what's important and what's not important and what a proper context is. That's a completely unmediated basically turning over full access of your network to one candidate and doing it over and over and over again. So I think that was a bad idea, and I think CNN these days acknowledges that that was a bad idea, and they wouldn't do that again. So I think they've learned from that. I don't think that, I mean, look, as soon as Trump announced his candidacy and he made his incendiary remarks about Mexicans being rapists, like it, you may not like it, but he rose right to the top of the Republican field, and he was the leading candidate, and he remained the leading candidate throughout the entire set of Republican primaries. How can you not cover him? And the more outrageous things he said, the more he rose in the polls. And people have access to that information. They don't rely just on us for that. Ideally, they rely on us to put it into proper context. So I don't think that we paid too much attention to him. He was an incredible phenomenon. I do think we had an obligation to investigate him as much as possible, and we did from the very beginning. We actually produced a book on that called Trump Revealed, which came out in August before the 2016 election. And we had been doing a series of investigative pieces looking at his life and career. And we then dedicated another 20 reporters to produce the book and look at everything that we could get, everything. And I think if somebody goes back and looks at that book, you'll see that while we didn't have everything, we had almost everything. And it is quite, it was called Trump Revealed, and it is quite revelatory about him and his life and his business dealings and his character. And I think we had an obligation to tell the public who he was and what he would be like and what his history was. And all of that has turned out to be, I think, has been validated.
So let me turn to the third dominant theme in the news in the past year or so, and that is the racial tensions in the country, the Black Lives Matter movement, that the killings of George Floyd and others. How did the Post approach those, knowing that in DC, granted you're not just a local newspaper, but in DC alone, there were tensions as well?
Sure. Well, everywhere in the country there was.
Yep.
And there were tensions in our newsroom as well, which we can talk about. So, look, I mean, it was these were the biggest social protests probably since the civil rights era. Protests for racial justice. They're a huge story, incredibly important moment in American history, and I think an awakening. And a awakening and a reckoning for many Americans, including those of us in the press, about what more we needed to do and what had yet to be done, and the injustices that persisted in American society. And the protests were certainly in Washington, at Lafayette Square, right in front of the White House, famously, and elsewhere. And we now have a street, 16th Street, that goes right up to the White House. It's called Black Lives Matter Street. As I said, I think it was a reckoning for everyone. I think it was a reckoning for us, even within our newsroom. It was very emotional for Black journalists on our staff, for other journalists of color, and for all journalists, actually. And there was a feeling that we needed to do more in our newsroom to diversify our staff, to make sure that we had more journalists of color in more senior positions, that we broadened our coverage and dedicated more resources to coverage of these kinds of issues. And we acted on that. And not to say that everything we've done, that's the end of the line. It's the beginning, really. But we already had probably one of the most diverse news staffs in the country for a major news organization. But we needed to do more, do it more quickly. We needed to certainly pay more attention to diversity in the senior ranks of our newsroom. We did name a managing editor for diversity and inclusion. She's doing a great job. And we also dedicated 12 positions, 10 of them new, to covering issues of race, ethnicity, and identity, and everything from environmental disparities, health disparities, the administration of justice, the culture broadly stated, and a whole range of areas, categories, and the post is filled all but one of those positions as of this point, and I think that'll be great. It'll represent a major step forward for the post, but also as we've pointed out consistently, it's not like, okay, we're done. We did this and now we're finished. It's a concrete step forward that is a prelude to doing more.
Let me ask, I'll work in a question from Ulysses Melendez here too. A perception out in the country and in certain areas of a leftward lean in some of the mainstream media. And maybe in addressing this, if you could also discuss how the news operation of, say, the Washington Post handles things separate and apart from the editorial side, with the editorials and the op-eds, which I think in the case of the Post, the New York Times, and others was certainly very critical of the Trump administration.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we do have that division between the news side and the opinion side. We have a very strict wall between the two. In fact, when Donald Trump as a candidate came to the Post for an interview by the staff, it was for the editorial page, and nobody from the news department was allowed even into the meeting. And the transcription of what was said at the meeting was conducted by members of the opinion department, by nobody, and they shared it with us, but because it was on the record, but we weren't even allowed to put a tape recorder in there. So that's how strict it is. The biggest cable network in the United States is Fox News. The biggest radio program in the United States was the Rush Limbaugh show, till he passed away recently. When people talk about, that's mainstream press, by the way, largest radio talk radio program, largest cable network, that's mainstream press. Those out, both Limbaugh and Fox News often talk about the mainstream media. They are the mainstream media. So when people talk about leftward lean, I think it's really important that we remember who the dominant players actually are out there. Also, the Wall Street Journal is quite large, and while they do also have a very strict separation between the news department and the editorial department, their editorial page is it's not always in line with Trump, but it's quite conservative and sometimes in line with Trump. So, we don't hire people and ask them what their ideology is. I've never asked anybody what their political opinion is, because to me, it's not relevant. I want to know whether they are good journalists or they're not good journalists. And that's whether they fulfill the principles of our news organization, whether they can report well, whether they can write well, whether they're going to be accurate, fair, honest, honorable, and whether they're going to tell people what we found and tell them in a direct and unflinching way. And I couldn't care less what their political opinions are. So I don't ask about that. And I think it's much more complicated than that. And it's interesting that I always get asked that question, but people at places like Fox don't get asked that question. Well, what about their lean as well? So they have clear lean.
So let me just drill down a little more on this. Clearly, the attacks on the media, the fake news, enemy of the people, have done some damage in the population's confidence in and trust in journalism, fairly or unfairly. How do you get that back?
Well, I think it's important to put that in context too. First of all, it was happening before Donald Trump. There was a decline in trust in major media. And I think there are reasons for that, which we can get to. But there's been a decline in trust in almost all major institutions as well. Been a decline in trust in the presidency. There's been a decline in trust in Congress, which, by the way, has lower levels of trust than the media. There's been a decline in trust in major financial institutions. There's been a decline in trust in healthcare institutions. There's been a decline in trust more recently in the police, which had previously held up pretty well. The only place where there hasn't been a significant decline in trust, pretty much, is in the military. Even religious institutions have taken a pretty significant hit. So there's just a decline in trust in institutions overall, which is something that should concern us, I think, as a democracy that depends on having strong institutions. As I said, it predated Trump. I think a lot of that is related to greater polarization in American society. With people now with the internet being able to find so-called sources of information and news, or so-called news, so-called information that reaffirms or reinforces their pre-existing point of view. That's true on the right and it's true on the left. And so if you're not there reinforcing what they think is already true, telling them that what they think is absolutely right, they can distrust you. There was a Republican pollster, Frank Luntz, who said that that a lot of Trump supporters were looking, and it's not just true of Trump supporters, but a lot of Trump supporters were looking for people who would affirm them, not inform them. Informing means that you're going to learn new things, that you're going to discover things that you didn't know previously, or that may challenge your existing perspective or your existing understanding. Means you're going to learn something. Affirming means that somebody's there just to tell you that what you think is the case is absolutely right. And there are many media outlets out there now who are finding a niche, or so-called media outlets that have developed a commercial model based on telling people that what they think is absolutely right. If you think the election was stolen, you're absolutely right. If you think if you think Democrats are that they're just a bunch of pedophiles and that they're paid by the Chinese Communist Party and paid by George Soros, you are absolutely right. That's how they portray things. And that's true on the left too, that there are people who turn to outlets that simply tell them that they're absolutely right. And so if you're a news outlet that is not in the business of doing that, you are going to encounter some significant resistance and skepticism and distrust on the part of the public. That's a challenge. What can we do about it? I think there are a few things we can do. I don't guarantee that they're going to be all that successful. One, I think we can talk a little bit more about who we are. I think there are incredible, ridiculous stereotypes about who journalists are, that we all come from so-called elite colleges, that we all grew up on the East Coast, that we were all of a socioeconomic class, that we all have certain political opinions, that we have whatever. We have at the Post, people who grew up on family farms, people who were veterans, some of them combat veterans. We have people who grew up in evangelical households. We have people who are refugees to the United States. We have people who grew up in wealthy households. We have people who grew up in quite poor households. We have people of every race and ethnicity and identity you can imagine. And that's a good thing. I think we have to talk more about who we are and humanize ourselves, particularly at a time where we've gone through a period where there's been a concerted effort to dehumanize us. Number two is that I think we have to talk more about how we go about our work. I don't think people understand what it is we do. Many people don't understand that when we're writing about Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria, we actually have people there putting their lives at risk. And nobody puts their lives at risk in order to advance an ideological agenda. They go there because they think there's a greater purpose in informing the American public. And we have to talk more, show more of the documents that we're relying on, show the video that we are using as the basis for our report, talk more about how we went about our reporting. And then the third thing I would say that we can do is that we need to make sure that we cover all people in this country. We need to be out or in our communities, depending on the mission of the journalistic outlet. We have to talk to everybody. We have to be good listeners. There's way too much talking in journalism these days. I say this now as I'm here talking, but but you invited me. So, but there's just way too much talking and preaching and hectoring and all of that. It's not, we need to go back to listening, and listening really closely and listening generously, and hearing what people say, and then reporting on people in a way that they feel that they may not always be happy with what we report, that they feel that they were accurately, sensitively, and responsibly portrayed. And so that's something that we can do. But there's a bigger societal issue here, and that's, I mean, you know, at a time where people are living in sort of a parallel reality, or unreality, as I would call it. It's disconnected from facts, who believe in the most bizarre conspiracy theories and dangerous conspiracy theories. That's a societal issue, and the press can't solve that problem. Certainly can't solve it alone. And we're not the source of all problems, and we're not the source of all solutions, no matter what people seem to say. So, I mean, I think we need programs of media literacy in our secondary schools, and probably in universities as well. We need a restoration of civic education in the high schools and junior high schools. And we need to teach the history, more history about the founding principles of the country, even if we as a country have not always lived up to those principles.
So let me push you on that, because one of our co-sponsors for this event is our School of Journalism and Communications, and Dean Schreiner asked what role, if any, does higher education, in particular journalism education, play in terms of news literacy? What role should journalism schools play in contemporary media and news reporting?
Well, I think that, you know, this is a field that I think that educational institutions should be paying some attention to, and that is, how do we report and write and present our information in a way that actually instills trust, that provides more documentary evidence of what it is we're reporting. How do we fortify our journalism with primary information, so that the public, if it doubts us, can do its own research? We did that, for example, in the case of something we call the Afghanistan Papers, which was basically the secret history of the war in Afghanistan. Dozens and dozens of interviews that were done, where people talked about what they really saw and what they really witnessed and what really happened there. And it was not a flattering picture. But we, you know, when you would read the story, you could actually, it was annotated, so you could just click on something and it would take you to the document, the interview that was conducted, the transcript of the interview. It would highlight the portion of the interview that we were referring to, and you could read the entire interview if you so chose, right there. If we were referring to something that was on video, you could immediately go to the video. You could watch the whole video, you could watch that segment of the video. It's basically a way of reinforcing the journalism and strengthening it. And I think that's something that journalistic institutions are paying a lot more attention to now, is how can we do that and do it consistently? That's probably something that journalism schools, communication schools should be thinking about as well.
So we've got a fair number of questions here, and we are running out of time, but let me turn to the business side of things, if I can, for a minute, and then I want to come back to two questions related to journalism students, and also one question for you about your career. Jeff Bezos came in, and some would say rescued the Post. I remember, I lived in DC for 24 years. I remember how the Post kept reducing in size and staff, and even in the thickness of the newspaper back when we used to get the hard copy. What impact did he have? And then Gene Rosenberg also says, what is the working relationship between the Post, the news operation that you ran, and its owner?
Well, he had a profound impact. There's no question about it. I mean, we were in a state of decline. There's no question about it. We were cutting back staff. We didn't have a clear model for how to get out of the financial mess. He came in and he said he thought the strategy for the Post, while it might have been great for a previous time, and probably was not the right one for the present day. We were focused on, while we covered the government, we covered politics, we were focused primarily on our region. So Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland. And we said for and about Washington is how we said it at the time. That was a nice phrase, but it wasn't working commercially. And so he came in and he said, look, it's just the wrong strategy. You've taken all the pain of the internet, destroyed every pillar, financial pillar of the business, but the internet's given you a gift, and you haven't taken the gift. Of course, we were sitting there wondering, what is the gift? And the gift was worldwide distribution at virtually no additional cost. We didn't have to distribute papers anymore all over the place. And he said, you're ideally positioned to take this gift. Why? Because you're in the nation's capital. That's a good base for being a national or even international media outlet. Also because you have the name, the Washington Post, and that's a good name to leverage. It's kind of hard to do with the other places I've worked, the LA Times, the Miami Herald, the Boston Globe, that sort of thing. The New York Times can do it, but not those others. Given that New York's a major metropolitan area, one of the biggest in the world. And also you have this history and heritage to rely on that defines the identity of the Washington Post, going back to Watergate, shining a light in dark corners. And you have a brand that's recognized all around the nation. You just haven't capitalized on it. You haven't exploited it. And so, so with that, he said, let's do this. And now with the internet, everything can be digital. We don't have to deliver papers. Let's figure out how to do this. So he had a profound impact. That's the most fundamental way that he had an impact. Secondly, in terms of our relationship, he gets involved in the business side of things, the technology. What's our technology? What are the metrics are you using? What is the, everything from page load speeds to pricing to, other aspects of our business. He doesn't get involved in the practice of the journalism. He's never told me or anyone what to write about, what not to write about, how to write it. I always say he's never criticized us. He's never critiqued us. He's never suggested anything. He's never suppressed anything. He gives us our independence, and he wants us to have our independence. And he had confidence that we were running the news organization in the proper way. And he didn't want to get involved. And that was great because quite honestly, I didn't want him to get involved either. So, and he didn't want to. So that was good. So that's basically it. But in terms of the business side, he has a profound impact. There's no question about it.
So given, Marty, your extensive experience in a number of different news organizations, most of them are not going to find a Jeff Bezos to come to the rescue. What advice would you give them, particularly as social media has challenged the traditional mode of journalism?
Look, I think it's important not to be too pessimistic here. I mean, I'm not Pollyannish about the condition of the industry. It has huge challenges. It's a really disturbing time. On the other hand, I mean, I think we need to be optimists. We're never going to succeed unless we're optimists. And it wasn't that long ago that people were predicting the New York Times was going to go out of business. Its stock had fallen from $50 a share to $3.50. And people were predicting the Washington Post would go out of business. People were predicting a lot of things. And they turned out to be wrong. And our news organizations have been able to turn themselves around, defying those predictions. And so I think that local news organizations have the capacity to defy those forecasts as well. What should they do? Look, if I had an easy answer, I would be making quite a bit of money here. I wouldn't be sitting here,
talking with me,
unemployed, retired. I would be raking in the consulting dough. But I mean, my view is that people need to charge, first of all. I mean, that's one thing. We can't give our work away for free. We never did that when we had physical papers. We charged. You wanted the paper, you had to pay for it. Simple as that. We didn't say, hey, here's the paper, except for some free, sort of weeklies or whatever it was like that. But with the daily paper, you had to pay for it. But in exchange, there's something we have to offer in exchange, and that's what we have to offer: quality journalism. People aren't going to pay for anything unless we offer them journalism that they are willing to support, of a caliber that they're willing to support. And so you can't just charge and offer them nothing. So that is the bargain, is that we have to provide high quality journalism, and then ask people to pay for that. And now local news organizations have to define what is their mission and what are they going to continue doing and what are they not going to continue doing. That is a very difficult process. I know, because I've had to do that. I had to do that in Boston. And I was doing that in Washington before Jeff Bezos came around. So it's really hard, but I do think it's doable. And I think there's some examples out there. Boston's an example. I think they're doing reasonably well at the moment. They have their challenges, but they're doing reasonably well. Dallas, Minneapolis, San Francisco. There's some nonprofit models that are, doing okay. Not a lot, but look, it's doable. That's all I'm saying.
So let me ask you two last questions, because I know we're actually a little over time from what we told you, and I appreciate your flexibility. The first one comes from Amy Ellis, and she points out that you've had many incredible moments as a journalist, including the Pulitzer Prizes and having Liev Schreiber portraying you in the Oscar-winning movie Spotlight. That said, she wants to know, what was one of your worst days as a journalist and why?
Oh, gee, I'm not sure I want to tell you what my worst days were.
You had some.
Well, I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one. I'm not going to tell you all of them. There were plenty of difficult days. I can tell you that. It's just the nature of the field we're in. But, look, when I was at the Washington Post and it looked like it might be shut down, frankly, that I looked like I was going to have the great good fortune of being the editor of the Boston Globe when the New York Times Company, which was its then owner, might shut it down, and it threatened to do so. And there were some people who said that wasn't a serious threat, but I happen to believe that it was a serious threat. And they put it up for sale, and it wasn't clear what was going to happen. And at the same time, the company asked for, this was during the Great Recession, if people remember that. And they demanded gigantic concessions from the staff, 20% compensation, 20%. Was huge, and people were in shock. The staff was outraged. The union that represented our news staff and the advertising department and others was in a state of open revolt, and it was a very difficult. It was a really difficult time, and I'm glad they got through it. I'm glad I got through it, but it was pretty dispiriting.
Last question, and it's a little related to what Brian wanted to ask before. For the aspiring journalists out there, our students here at FIU and others who may be watching, what advice would you give them?
If you have passion for journalism, go into the field. It's going to change in many different ways. There's going to be a lot of challenges. Don't get discouraged by, all this discussion of the business model. The business model they'll find a business model. I think in a democracy like ours, there's a need for communication of what's happening in our communities and what's happening in our country. And there are all sorts of new media outlets that are developing. The way that we tell stories is going to change. Media will change. It always has. We had newspapers, and we had radio, then we had TV, and now we have the internet. The internet is a medium of its own. It opens the way for all sorts of new things. There are going to be, great opportunities there for people and young people who are interested in, who are willing and able to embrace the new ways that we tell stories, have the capacity to move along quite rapidly in their career. I think a lot of people in college, I don't want to offend all the parents of the kids in college, but their parents are always worried about what their starting salary is going to be once they leave school. I got to say, a lot of times people went into fields that it turns out that those jobs are now being done in India and China, and they thought they were real promising computer fields, and they're not doing it anymore. Or they wanted their kids to be a lawyer, and they discovered that, well, there aren't that many opportunities for lawyers these days. You can't predict how things are going to change 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. You shouldn't pick a profession based on what you think your starting salary is going to be the day you get out of college. If you have a passion, if you have a skill, if you have for this field, there is going to be a field of journalism. It will be different. Just get used to the idea that it will be different. Don't take anything for granted. I mean, I gave a speech at FIU some years ago, which I thought was pretty good, actually. And I said that one of the great things about FIU is that so many of the students at FIU, they come from immigrant backgrounds. They don't feel entitled. They don't feel any sense of entitlement. And that's the perfect way to feel when you go into the field of journalism. Don't feel entitled to anything. Work for it. And you're already ready for it. If you don't feel entitled, if you don't feel a sense of entitlement, journalism as it is today is a really good profession for you.
Marty Barron, you're just 2 weeks out from having left the Washington Post as executive editor. We're incredibly grateful that you took the time to join us here today. Many, many thanks. Really appreciate this. Is fascinating, and I hope we can return to this at some point in the future. This has been the first in a series of monthly conversations on the role of the media in contemporary society. And it's a joint effort between FIU's School of Communication and Journalism and the Steven J. Green School of International and Public Affairs. I'm David Kramer, Senior Fellow with the Green School. Thanks very much for joining us. And Marty, many thanks again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.